Are we on air? We're here. Yes, hello, good evening again, and welcome to another edition of the Tony Topping Show, reaching out across the UK, across the universe, and across the cosmos. And we have a very special guest on. I'm absolutely fascinated by her, and she is called Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, so I understand. Across YouTube, she's given speeches, she's trying to understand the bigger picture, she's been slated by people left, right and centre. I don't agree with that. I just find that absolutely fascinating. And she's going to discuss with us, my head's spinning, I've no idea about all this ascension timelines, time travel to Mars, people who are being handled by dark forces, majestic. I think we're going to cover the whole lot within an hour. We're going to do a blast with Laura, I think is what we're going to do. Laura, good evening.
Good evening. Great to be here.
Oh, thank you. And I understand that we've finally got in contact with each other after all this time. And I started my own radio show interviewing different people, and I found that it's kind of like taken off. And what's fascinating for us Brit listeners, especially the lads in the pub who keep in the bar here, who keep an eye on we're running our own version of Majestic. What's fascinating is that you are Eisenhower's great-granddaughter. I'm fascinated. Tell us more.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was quite an interesting upbringing. I mean, in the sense that it was very normal, compared to my mother's experience when she was, going through high school and everything with, Eisenhower, just, freshly, in office or leaving office and just having Secret Service men. I didn't have any of that, but definitely the backdrop of being in this family opened my eyes up a lot to, things that I went and experienced on my own and researched on my own. And so I guess what was interesting is that it was a normal family, just like anybody else's in a lot of ways. I mean, I know the word normal is a little bit of a stretch, but we weren't like, one of those families that are sitting on a pile of money, sort of what people might think of as a presidential family. We're not an Illuminati family. There isn't like a whole lot of wealth or a whole lot of, differences as far as just the way we all have to
Could I just come
work.
in there, Laura? I know you were in flow there regarding that. Well, you said a crucial remark there that Eisenhower, you were not an Illuminati family. That is actually because Eisenhower was indeed not a member of any secret society or Illuminati. I think he's one of the few presidents that were. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think people have a lot of questions about that. And so we all work just like everybody else to make a living. There's no trust funds. And so in that sense, there's that level of normalcy. But, with nothing being discussed about UFOs and extraterrestrials, that was really something I delved into. And a lot of my experiences brought me into a lot of awareness about that. So it was unusual for me to not have anybody else in the family to discuss this with. But it's a very loving family. But my eyes were opened at a young age because of my own personal experiences and what I know I came here to do and how it links to a lot of the hidden stuff that happened during his administration.
Good gracious, the hidden stuff that happened during his administration. So what went on with the hidden stuff that happened during his administration?
Well, coming out of the Second World War and moving into the presidency, once Truman had left, there was already 3-letter organizations, CIA, all those hidden organizations were established, and also the Roswell crash and Area 51. So, a lot of that was secretive. That's why those hidden groups were created, and of course, some of them with cover. I guess you could say, what's the word? Cover stories as far as what they're really doing. We hear about the CIA, but we don't really understand the military-industrial complex on an extraterrestrial level and how that relates to hidden alien agendas. We just don't hear that, except for maybe in the X-Files or something. So a lot of that was going on. Treaties were signed, even before Eisenhower. And it actually started with Roosevelt. So by the time Eisenhower came into office, there was not a whole lot of power anymore for the presidency. And this is what he warned us about in his farewell address about the military-industrial complex. So there was a lot of things connected to extraterrestrials and different races that were happening. 3 different races, to be pretty much correct in my assumption based on all the research I've done. There were visitations from the Nordics, the Greys, and then also beings from Venus later in the 60s with him and Nixon, and they actually really wanted to help the beings from Venus. Valiant Thor is the name of the commander, so anybody who wants to Google that and find out more about it, there's going to be a movie coming out. So we hear just a lot about different races, both benevolent and malevolent, and a lot of that happened during his administration. And also things like Alternative 3, which connect to the Mars colony and the Mars agenda.
It's a lot to handle, Laura, for anybody who will be first listening to this. But what is interesting is I've just been speaking to Steve Bassett of the Citizens UFO hearing in a very unorthodox interview where we didn't get round to actually discussing the Citizens UFO discussion. We did get round to discussing about covert agencies' harassment of UFO researchers, a very important issue, which I must say he did admirably in explaining his opinion on. But what I put to him was the Citizens disclosure on UFO hearing is very admirable, of course, and I just put to him that there is possibly, however, within the national security apparatus of your country, a possible complicitness going on with an off-world intelligence. What I'm open to suggestions. What do you think?
About off-planet intelligences working with our government?
Yeah, in a complicit and unethical and unorthodox way that probably isn't in line with, let us say, the philosophy of Gaia and the ascension to the higher universe. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, this is really what the dilemma is. These alien agendas that aren't really working in harmony with our ascension, they're actually opposing it and are wishing to play the role of our gods, our controllers, and this is the deal with the agendas and the treaties. Even though at the time I don't think our leaders really understood the gravity of what they were dealing with, particularly Eisenhower. I think he went into somewhat of a shock, whereas other leaders or other beings that are associated with the shadow government align themselves with these dark alien agendas because they feel they'll get something out of it, and they just act as their pawns and allow them to be their masters. And these are technologies that they use that are not in harmony with nature. They have more to do with mind control and social engineering and affecting our food and our water. I mean, it connects to the chemtrails and geoengineering and the transhumanism agendas, which will really pull us into the technological world in a way we do not want.
So how does the, particularly on chemtrails, how does the alien agenda rear its head in that little area of nastiness then?
Well, it seems to all be connected. The technology exchanges that have to do with mind control, weather control, anything that has to do with control is definitely a malevolent agenda because the ascension has nothing to do with control. It has to do with expansion and stepping into our spiritual abilities because really we're the most advanced technology, and they're plugging us way into a machine that isn't utilizing technology in harmony with nature. Like the higher technologies of sound, frequency, and vibration, it's more just about an elitist group playing with the controls of everything, and it's not natural, and it's what we don't want at all.
and of course, your relative, President Eisenhower, came across then this elitist group. Am I right in saying, is that?
Yeah, I mean, he was right smack bang in the middle of it without really realizing, what he was dealing with because, there's compartmentalism. The president is only told so much. There's a hidden government underneath it all, and they're barely really briefed about that. And because he dealt with some of the extraterrestrial presence, he was discovering more and more about, his allies and his colleagues that were all about assisting them in their agenda. And I know it shocked him. He had 8 heart attacks, and I guess 3 or 4 of them were after he was president. But he was dealing with people dying if they were to expose these sort of truths. He's wanted to expose certain truths that he was shut down in doing. They shut down everything that connected to the beings from Venus and their assistance, but the beings from Venus ended up still staying on Earth. And I know that sounds very far-fetched for people that can't even get to the first part of it, which is handling the fact that there are extraterrestrials, but we have to recognize, we are multidimensional beings.
The thing with that is we get to the bit where we get to the president having the heart attacks and all that kind of thing, and then you make the remark regarding Venus. Now people would switch off from that and go, bullshit. Tell us why, Laura. These beings come from Venus. I think I know where you're coming from. Just to explain a bit more on that.
Okay, well, we have to first of all open our minds a little bit. We are a planet surrounded by other celestial bodies, and we are in a multidimensional cosmos, and we can just look in the sky and look to nature and just be wowed by all the creatures that we see and all the beauty and all the uniqueness. We have to open ourselves up to the fact that there is more. I mean, why would sci-fi movies have so much to work with if there wasn't some basis in reality? And we're in 2013 right now, and we have to at least, accept the fact there's extraterrestrial life, or we'll never understand why they're here and what their intentions are. As far as the beings from Venus, people need to look at, some material online. There's a person called Frank Stranges who wrote a book about it. My friend Craig Campobasso, who's a producer in Hollywood, is coming out with a movie. He's had contact with these beings. The evidence is pretty vast.
Sorry, who's had contact with the beings, Laura, from Venus?
A person that's alive and that people can have contact with is the producer of the movie Stranger at the Pentagon, which is the story of the beings from Venus. Right. Yeah, so this is all coming out. This is why it's good to prepare people. I'm not just throwing it out for people to chew on and be confused by it. There's going to be a lot coming out into the mainstream about it. And his name is Craig Campobasso. That's camp like summer camp, Campobasso. And he's written a book about some higher beings, extraterrestrials, and he personally has had contact with the beings that I'm talking about that were around during Eisenhower's administration. And because everybody who might be hearing this is saying, this is nuts, this is probably why Eisenhower had a few heart attacks, because it's very shocking for anybody who comes across beings like this. Because, and it's not easy to be the messenger either, because, just because it's hard for people to hear, they have to understand that it's not easy for the people delivering the information
Correct.
Either.
Yeah, you couldn't present this, you'd have to be very professional in how you did it if you were to present it as a briefing to a president or even our prime minister for that matter, because there are extremes to it. They possibly reach for the drinks cabinet, because you have to be a special breed of individual, and I don't mean that in an elitist way, a special, probably cursed in some cases as far as I'm concerned. And so sounds like a good film. And of course with all this going on, Eisenhower met the aliens, and there's a recent thing to do with, so I'm told, and there was a recent thing to do with a recent CIA whistleblower who said that Eisenhower wanted to invade Area 51. Is that, do you know?
Yeah,
I
do. I was going to go
and
be a part of that interview, so I know all about it. And so this is what we're dealing with.
Right.
And we're dealing with both positive and negative races. And so the invasion of Area 51, I don't think happened because, another group of beings ended up showing up, and maybe they halted it because they wanted to assist. I mean, I don't have those kind of answers, but just based on what you just said, I saw that video. I was going to be a part of that, and hopefully there's more information to come as to why the invasion didn't happen. I need to get the years to line it up with the rest of the information that I have. And, what I recommend to people is, have an open mind, but don't create fixed beliefs until you're sure about any of it. But the thing is, there are black projects going on at Area 51, and it really worried and scared the president, which is what he said. But later on, here we are dealing with some benevolent forces, from Venus. And of course we look at Venus and we look at Mars and we say, how can any being live on there? It's hostile environments. But there's underground dwellings, they come and go from within. The planets are hollow.
Yeah, well indeed so, Laura. And I think what we have also got to realise as well, from the point of view of the gentleman who's planning the PayPal guy who was wanting to colonise Mars, and I heard rumours about a big Bilderberg-style UFO summit of researchers, and they want to colonise Mars. I think that they would probably be in for a very rude awakening going to another planet like Mars, and would probably indeed discover that strange things happen, in terms of time displacement, awareness, and the fact that, yes, there is the possibility that the place could actually be occupied.
Well, they should know some of this already. The elitists seem to know a lot. They use these technologies. It depends where you are, though, and who you are, because, like I said, compartmentalism, a lot of people feel that they're serving humanity and our country, when they work for, some of these, groups, and later realize that they, had evil intent. Like Phil Schneider, who spoke out, he thought he was doing good, and when he discovered what he was doing and he was helping to, build underground bases, or to make that possible, for malevolent races, he spoke out and then he was killed. So, It's not the easiest thing. A lot of people don't really recognize, what's happening, but like I said, it depends who you are and where you are. But a lot of them, utilize this technology, and they have time travel teleportation technology, and they do know that there's other races there. Mars was occupied way back when, thousands and thousands of years ago, and Maldek was also a planet which exploded and became the asteroid belt, and it wiped out all life on Mars. And that's probably part of the reason why they want to recolonize it.
That is in the, now correct me if I'm wrong, just for the listeners, that actually what you've come out with is an actual factual thing, isn't it, Laura? From the ancient book of something to do with the Elohim or the Anunnaki, I've forgotten the name of it, but it is written in ancient Babylonian text, yes, no?
Mm-hmm.
Precisely what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Where the planet, that's very interesting indeed. And of course, as you've been involved in this, for a number of years. I'm interested to know what you think the current, situation is with the current president as compared to Eisenhower.
Well, Eisenhower, a lot of people say, Eisenhower and Kennedy were the last real presidents. Everything pretty much got taken over, during that time, and when Eisenhower briefed, Kennedy on the UFO issue, and he wanted to come clean about some of this stuff, that was it for him. And that's sort of where the presidency became a CIA project, and presidents were beginning to be groomed to be in that position in a way that I don't think was the case when Eisenhower and Kennedy were president. Kennedy was a part of the Illuminati family, but he wasn't like them. He was definitely his own person. Eisenhower wasn't Illuminati, but, other presidents before him perhaps. But now what we're seeing is, groomed presidents that are, picked and, they're worked with via the use of technology. And Andrew Basiago, my colleague, actually says that Obama, who formerly was named Barry Soetoro, was in his Mars training program, and says that Obama actually teleported to Mars as well. And I know that's hard for people to grasp.
Hard to understand. Let's just clarify for the listeners what you're saying and who Andrew is. Basically, you've just come out with a remark that the US President, Obama, travelled back to Mars. Is that correct, what you're saying?
Yeah, I have no proof of that, but my colleague was in Project Pegasus. He's a child participant, and he is the first child to teleport anywhere. And he was kind of like what he calls a guinea pig, because they were using a lot of these technologies on children to see if they'd be able to survive, to see what their experiences were. And it's easier for children because they're less programmed like adults.
Okay.
And he was in a Mars training program in the Siskiyous, in California, in the 80s, and said that Obama was in that class with him. So I would definitely look him up and see what he has to say about it. But currently the presidency is more a CIA project than an actual, individual that we vote for. There's a lot deeper stuff going on there.
Okay, but so president is selected by the CIA. What is for the listeners? What is Project Pegasus about?
Project Pegasus is basically a part of the Department of Defense. It's a hidden project. Let's see how to really describe it. They utilize time travel and also teleportation, many different forms of, many different uses of these technologies. I think Andrew said there's 8 different forms of teleportation and time travel, and it's based on Tesla technology. And he's, time travel, but the thing that they're discovering is that they're able to simulate realities, and they're not actually sure if these are simulations or actual events that he time traveled to. And so, a lot of this stuff also relates to gray alien technology. And so it's interesting getting to know him because he's trying to sort a lot of this out, himself. But yeah, to put it in words, it's really about quantum access. And what these projects are all about is gaining information about the past and the future in order to affect events to steer us on a particular timeline. And that's what I discovered because I was recruited to go to Mars in 2006, and it seems to very much connect.
When you say recruited to go to Mars, Laura, what do you mean? Do you mean that NASA recruited you in a spaceship, or do you mean you were recruited to go to Mars in terms of a subconscious non-locality type program?
I met somebody who was a part of this project and program, and actually Andrew Basiago said that I was mentioned in Project Pegasus, and the whole thing is connected. But I'm a later time in the in the chain of events. I was approached by somebody who was going to secret meetings in D.C. He didn't tell me anything until later, but he had brought up, the fact that these secret meetings had to do with going to Mars and that the target date was 2012. He brought up looking glass technologies. Later on, that's when I started
to... Stop you there, Laura. Sorry about this. What you're doing is you're speaking rapidly. You've come alive with information, and I'm having to just, for the listeners, I'm just listening in fascination. I'm just having to, you came out with something there, looking glass technologies. What's that about?
I was just about to explain.
Wow,
yeah,
wait.
I was just about to explain that, because I know people are like, what? And that's when I started to learn about Dan Burisch, who, is a whistleblower for MJ12. He talked about looking glass technologies. And looking glass technologies are a quantum access technology. They're cylinder seals, and they're used to look at past events and future events. And this is how they targeted me, and the person that wanted to recruit me. And so there's a lot of cover stories about why. I was told it was for protection and to protect the human genome, and later on came to discover that it was to help them reseed a new civilization on Mars. But when I was with the man who wanted me to go, his behavior was very strange. He would, disappear for days after getting codes given to him over the phone. He had a handler. I didn't understand any of this at the time because there was no Project Camelot or whistleblowers that were public, and I was trying to sort it all out. So I knew that I wasn't going to go, and I knew that something was very fishy, and it wasn't just for my protection. So I started to research all the names that he was mentioning, who his handlers were. And after about 2 weeks of research, I discovered that their names were linked to technologies that they're using here on Earth. Mind control technologies, HARP, things that influence the weather, things that can simulate disasters. So what I came to understand was that they wanted me to go to Mars as sort of a protection from possible cataclysms, but they were in fact connected to bringing on these cataclysms and creating this in order to have a new world order agenda, which is to thin out the population and control the remaining humans that still, made it. And they also have, underground bases and off-planet colonies like Mars to, take a select few out of, the destruction that they were planning. And I was going to be one of them, and I chose not to. People can say, well, that was stupid, but I'm not, who wants to be with a bunch of elitists that keep humanity in the dark? So I just have higher standards as far as, the way I want to be, and I have just integrity, and I, think that humanity needs to know, and we need to look out for Mother Earth, rather than going off to a planet and letting this one self-destruct.
Yeah, I understand that. And this guy, Andrew, what's his surname? Basiago, is that correct? Sorry?
Yeah, Basiago.
Right, Basiago. And he was involved in a time travel project as well.
Right. I never time traveled, and I never went to Mars, but Andrew Basiago has.
Oh, I see. This is the clarification, I think, where people get confused with you, because they get the instant sudden impression without asking you that you'd time traveled to Mars and you'd done this and you'd done that, and obviously
that I've never written that.
No.
Right, I've never written that. I was recruited in 2006 to go and be a permanent colonist. Andrew Basiago was involved in a project to help implement the colony and be experimented upon to see how he would be able to survive in such a hostile environment. And just, those were the children. Those were the projects that had to do with, establishing the colony and refurbishing, there's other things connected to, the terraforming of Mars. But the thing that I got brought in on was being a colonist and actually being a permanent resident. Andrew was there, but not permanently. He wasn't chosen to be permanent, but he was used for a particular amount of time by the hidden government, but never was compensated for.
So what you're saying is that as a child he time traveled to Mars. Then am I right in saying
he teleported to Mars? He time traveled to other events in our human history, but didn't time travel to Mars. He teleported to Mars via jump rooms. Those aren't time travel; those are teleportation, and they'll take you to a location through wormholes way quicker than what we think. Which is light years. It's light years away, but when you teleport, it's actually you're going through a wormhole, and you're there in like 20 minutes, and it's like an elevator.
But I mean, on saying that, Laura, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I've listened to everything you've said, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. Yes, but surely, Laura, this new age claptrap you're coming out with, surely you just take things at face value. I mean, that's just a bloke you've met who's come out with any old BS that he's time travelled to Mars.
Yeah, well, I'm a major skeptic to everything I share and everybody I'm around. I'm not one to just, I've been doing this since I was 6 years old. I've been on this path. I've known Andrew for 2 years. I've done events with him. I spent, days with him in Hawaii. I've had numerous conversations. And so when you have an open mind, but you don't have fixed beliefs, and you give a person the benefit of the doubt, and you're also very skeptical, then you have a good head about your shoulders, and you're in your intuition. I believe that what he is saying is sincere, and he believes in what he's saying, but I have no actual real proof to say 100% that I'm positive about all that he's been through. But based on his character, based on the amount of conversations I've had with him that are so articulate, and he says the same things each time. It's not like he's scattered, and he's very honest. When other whistleblowers come to the scene, if it's different information than what he previously thought, he will consider it and he'll look at it. And he's just in his own process trying to recall memories. So, we're all doing the best we can, and I think people expect some perfection or we're going to have it 100%. We're all doing the best we can. We're all dedicated to truth. I'm pretty independent, so is he. We do our own thing. I had my experience. It correlates with his. In Project Pegasus, my name was mentioned. Alfred Weber, who works with both of us, has been a strong supporter of Andy, so I have tons of, conversations with Alfred. And, if I was just hearing it like on the internet, I'd feel like everybody else, all the reasons why it might be, disinformation or just, BS. But when you're living it and when you're in it and when you're around these people and you do events and you're putting the dots together and you hear this information and it's not just coming from one source. I mean, I know many sources. It's not just Andrew Basiago. We've got Michael Reif, who has the Mars records. Him and his wife used a biofeedback technology to bring up all his memories of his time on Mars. You can Google it. It's called the Mars Records. And, it's very in-depth, and it really does explain the challenges of coming out with this information and all that comes with it, all the backlash. But, we have to just be open to it as best as we can, and we have to have discernment. I am not here to, create belief systems or to force anybody to believe anything, but I do have a responsibility to share my story and to put as many pieces together as I can.
It's very... Yeah, well done you, Laura, because I might not necessarily believe what you're saying, but it's important to get that clarification in, because I've read the material of people having a go at you from UFO organisations about this, and they seem to miss the point entirely. And I think you've done very well there in clarifying all that. A point of fascination for me then is I have had UFO experiences lasting a lifetime. I'm a bit of a Jason Bourne. I'm not the kind of guy you think I am, sat here maybe speaking to you about UFOs and the paranormal. I really have had the extreme experiences. The elephant in the room is always time. It's always the signals in time that you're hearing, and from that, on the Mars issue, I gained that it's an absolute dump. Who would want to live at Mars? Human beings going to Mars are gonna get very bored with themselves. It's not the same as Gaia. It's not even the same timeline, is it? Which brings us nicely round to your work, which I'm also fascinated in, to do with it. Now, what do you call this then? Sophia Ascension, Gaia timeline?
Yeah, well, it's the organic ascension timeline. It's really the natural blossoming of human consciousness. And because this timeline has been intruded upon and infiltrated and invaded, it's been very hard to hold ground. Particularly, we all have our stories, but I almost got dragged off to Mars. I knew that wasn't where it was at. I knew that this was a timeline I didn't want. As far as what's happening there and what the truth is, that's a whole nother debate. But the whole basis of my work isn't about proving that Andrew Basiago is 100% true, because that's not my responsibility. He can speak his own truth and people can decide. I can only share tidbits that relate to my story. But, the thing that I discovered, starting from a very young age is that, there's been this massive infiltration. There is a complete and total attack on our ascension and our natural upgrading of DNA and everything, that would bring us, to where we are today. more expansive, in unity consciousness, the inner balance of the masculine and feminine, all that is being slowly sabotaged over time. And it's part of the social engineering and conditioning. And what it's trying to do is siphon us into artificial timelines that have more to do with alien agendas and control forces. And the way people can relate to it so it doesn't go over their head is, think about the human system. We have an ego. It doesn't always serve our higher self. Sometimes it wants to take us in a different direction than what's good for us. And it tends to be controlling at times. It tends to be self-absorbed. These are the elitists. They're very connected to that Mars ego, dominating energy. But, we don't have to get so confused by it. We just have to look to ourselves. And so the Ascension timeline, the organic Ascension timeline, has much more to do with the inner work, pulling ourselves out of the different programmings, that have brainwashed us and have caused us a lot of disconnect within ourselves and with each other and our relationships, and to get all that back on track and to understand as well that our planetary body's in alignment with the galactic plane, and we are being, we're receiving all sorts of transmissions from the galactic core that are helping us to ascend. And it's coming from the depths of the earth through our feet chakra. It's coming from within us. But all these infiltrations and intrusions have made it very, very hard to hold our ground. And that's our challenge right now. Not to go into fear or to get overwhelmed by all these crazy stories people are coming out with, including mine, but to just really understand, this planetary body and the fact that it's a multi-dimensional, cosmic, divine manifestation of source energy. And my presentations are all about that, how that came to be the case. It's different than any other planet in the cosmos, and there's reasons for this. And that's really what I get into. And so this is an amazing time, but at the same time, the forces that wish to enslave us are working real hard to prevent our ascension. And it's very natural. It's the most real thing. Everything else is artificial. It's a simulation, and it's a deception.
It is, and you've come out with in such a short space of time there, you've come out with a lot of stuff. We have forgotten who we are. Some of us have been lucky enough to be given the gift, the gift, to be educated, shall we say, by these other intelligences about the awareness of who we were, what we were, and how we were linked to the cosmos. And this, of course, is generating all kinds of problems. Interestingly enough, Laura, you're talking sense. What you're talking is actual sense for those of us who have been there. We have switched off from ourselves. Do you think that your country, America, is perhaps the only country on Earth that can handle this situation to reach an ascension with humanity? Do you think that despite all the chaos and violence that we see within America, that it is actually a spiritually awakened nation?
I think it's getting there because it's getting so obvious that we're being so robbed of our rights. I mean, there was a big Monsanto protest and it wasn't covered at all on the news. It's so obvious that we're being lied to. I mean, they can't fool us anymore, and people are really, really waking up. I mean, a lot of the disasters that have happened, a lot of the bombings that have happened, there's too many loopholes, there's too much that doesn't make sense, and particularly after 9/11, I think a lot of people really started to wake up because, of course, Building 7 fell in demolition style without even being struck by a plane. So, they can call all these conspiracy theorists. I don't consider myself even a conspiracy theorist. To me, it's like a reality. But when you look at the facts, I mean, it's crazy not to notice that some things just don't line up. Yeah. And so I think, that word is spread and people are looking in the sky, they're seeing chemtrails, and, it's just the numbers are growing. They really, really are. And I think deep down, we all are spiritual beings, and it's just crying out to come to the surface, and everything else, is just expiring. It's like enough already. People are getting really sick of the facade, of the media, of all the lies and all the distortions that are just very superficial, and they're just trying to addict us, to this very false world, and people are getting deeper. They recognize that there's a lot more to them than that.
Yeah, it is. I think yes, you're absolutely correct, and there is an exile of the divine feminine energies within, which is interesting to note when you look at your interviews on YouTube, Laura. The many men the many guys, not females, but men who are having a go at you. And it's interesting to note, I think, that is maybe would you not agree that that's maybe a mirror of what is going on at some level?
Yeah, absolutely. Men are resisting it. They're not raised. I mean, the conditioning in our society is not to see, women or their own inner feminine in the essence of, intuition, nurturing, birthing new realities, the cosmic feminine, the earth, the Mother Earth. I mean, we have to kind of get out of these gender stereotypes and recognize what the masculine and feminine, is on a more organic level. And they're so conditioned to shut it down, to not respect it, to not want to listen to wisdom that women have. It's all about control, dominance, ego, and objectifying women. I mean, I could go on, and I know everybody already knows this already, but there's so much more to the story. And so I think I'm just getting shut down because there's a major resistance, because if people were to embrace it, then they'd be waking it up within themselves, because men have the divine feminine within them, and they have an absolute refusal at times to look at that part of themselves that would balance, that ego and help them to discover the divine masculine. And we're not taught those things. And every other form of behavior that's not honoring of this is rewarded in our society. And so I think it's just a reaction, and soon it'll dissipate, but maybe not for some, and that's really their problem. So I don't really let it get to me. I just let it remind me, okay, well, that's where a lot of people are still at. That's just great. All the part, just have fun with it, because it's not really going to get you anywhere.
Have you been on the receiving end of the mainstream media, in all your work? Have you been, have you been ridiculed by the mainstream media, and has that happened to you then?
No, not really. I mean, I went on the Russell Brand show, and
Right.
it was, a comedy show, and it was, I was sort of laughed at, but it was no big deal. I did a conference soon afterwards, and a bunch of people that had seen me on the show went to the conference just to see me. I had, 300 new people on Facebook, and, I don't have time to even be too concerned about it, but I was on a panel, the Project Camelot, Awake and Aware panel, with 11 men. I was the only woman besides Carrie Cassidy. And, I just thought that was a great position to be in, because here, very renowned, physicists and ufologists and producers and filmmakers and authors. And, they're all men, and they all have a lot to say about what's happening on the earth right now. We had Jordan Maxwell, Richard Hoagland, the list goes on, George Green, even Preston Nichols, who was involved with the Montauk Project, was on the panel. And, so I was able to speak, and I got, huge applauses, and people really resonated with what I had to share. And so, even in the case of however the male energy is, or how much, media stuff after being on the Russell Brand show, I feel, that I get more positive feedback that hits my attention more so than the negative. I definitely feel, supported, but I expect a lot of backlash. So it makes me stronger, because if I didn't own my inner truth, and it might shake my foundation and frustrate me or deeply upset me, but, it strengthens me, because it reinforces how much this is, true to me, and there's no shaking it. No matter how much insult gets thrown at me, it just completely and totally reminds me of how strong I am and what I'm doing. So it doesn't really bother me. It used to a little bit, but.
What is interesting, Laura, about your work is the fact that you come out with a lot of terms and in information. I've been looking at your work, and I'm interested to know something and I'm going to lead into another question. Archons and inorganic influence, is that in line with kind of like Carlos Castaneda with the inorganic beings, or is it something entirely different?
Yeah, I think it all relates. I think the Archons are like the fallen watchers too, that, it's just the energy, that got created, from all those different fallen angelic realms. It's a lot of different negative energies. There's 7 rulers or 7 Elohim, but the fallen Elohim, almost become like the 7 archons. They're duality. They're both positive and negative. We've got archangels. Archon is connected to the word arch. So we have archangels and there's archdemons. And they're both archons. Archons can be positive or negative, but the thing is, they're part of the morphogenetic field, and they get into our brains, they get into our emotions and into our thoughts, because they're archetypal imprints from our ancient history and from, I guess you could say, the gods and goddesses that are split aspects of the Godhead, of the Trinity. And so all these different archetypes play out, and we are deeply sensitive to them, and it's up to us to sort them out on the inside so that we become whole again and we become balanced, and that we emit that energy rather than absorb all the chaos and become like that. It's similar to, inheriting what our biological parents passed down to us. We either become just like them or we rise above it and we become a stronger and better expression. And so we need to understand the archons in a similar way. The inorganic aspect of it is that it's not, some of the archons are not aligned with love or source energy. They become more like vampire parasitic forces that like to feed on people and like to get in the way and cause all sorts of upset. But, that's just like the negative ego. You have to have a receptor to it for it to work. Yes, you do have to have a receptor for it. What is a worry, Laura, and I don't know what you think, it's concerned me for quite a while, is that we have forgotten who we are. Our spirits are in a forgotten state of ascension with the higher cosmic being. And anybody who breaks free of that will be hit, and hit hard. Now, you would probably know what I mean by that, and my listeners may not know what I mean by that, but if you ascend, as a human being, even though you're going about your daily life, if you have reached a point of cosmic ascension, they will be onto you. What worries me about all this is the fact that a lot of metaphysical stuff is spoken in terms of words. But I think, speaking as a man, because the theme is about the divine feminine, isn't it? I'm noticing that these ETs are using advanced technology. They're not using fluffy words like ascension or transcend. They're using technology, like Corso said, like a foreign power. And it's a concern. What do you think in terms from where you're sat with all your experiences? Yeah, well, the technology is the problem, and it can cause, quite a bit of damage. It's a lot different than just the disinfo out there, or the New Age deceptions where it's all this fluffy talk. And there still is that, the false ascended masters, and just, some of the programmings in the New Age communities are very, very dangerous. But now, the technology aspect, makes it that much more difficult. And the thing is, technology mimics our natural abilities, and it uses it against us. They are turning free energy into a weapon. They're doing that with the earth energies. They're doing it with our own energy and the power that we give to them when we buy into the system, when we still are voting for a president and we're still, listening to the news and eating it up like it's real. We are giving them our energy to fuel these technologies, because a lot of these technologies are built on free energy, like HARP. It's sucking the prana from the earth. Chemtrails, work with the chi of the environment. I mean, they use natural means and our own energy. So we have to call that back to us, number one. And when we do hit that attack, I've been dealing with targeting and attacks since I was small, and have gotten on the other side of it. Now I'm not so attacked anymore, but more just, on a massive scale with everybody else, the chemtrail assaults and this and that. I'm not so personally attacked and assaulted like I used to be, because I eventually got my frequency high enough to not be the effect of it. And it took a lot. And I'm not saying that I don't sink or find myself attacked or this or that, but I call it, it's like going through the dark night of the soul. Even though it's different and there's technologies, it's all about raising our frequency. These technologies are sourced out of, lower fourth dimensional energies. We're much higher than that. We can raise our frequency above that and not have the technologies get the best of us.
That is correct, which is probably why there's such an interest from off-world intelligences with the human race. Because I think if you look at, I keep parroting on about India, but if you look at some of India's stuff, there's been a think tank in India, from what I can perceive, that's been between 2009 and 2010, whacking out stuff into their media to do with UFOs at a very advanced level and their understanding of what is going on. And one of the things that they came across, Laura, I don't know what your take is on this, and then I'd like you to tell the listeners after this bit about your UFO experiences, if you wouldn't mind, because I also find that interesting. As a matter of, so where were we? India, yeah. Basically the gist of it was they concluded, this think tank, whoever they were, concluded that at the point of death, where we're coming out of the body, we do what probably the ancient Toltecs and what probably you're familiar with, the process of recapitulation, whereby every moment of life and every action is recorded. I think the ancient teachings said it takes about 5 days, or more, where every bit of life, every moment is actually recorded. And their conclusion was that the quantum physics and the biology and everything to do with that would be highly complex. The science behind the soul transcending, behind it recalling, would be highly complex, which is what has got them on the thinking that, therefore, when we are approaching the tunnel of light, they perceive that we are approaching some type of intelligence that they would call a Type 5, and we are an aspect of this highly intelligent projection. Hence the interest from UFOs with the human race, the abductions and the agendas. How does that sit with you from where you're, with your experiences?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of different types of beings and races out there that have different reasons that they want their attention on us, whether it be hybridization or, chipping us and tagging us, or just experimenting or trying to understand how we have an emotional body and how we are ascended beings. And, there's a lot there. So I'm not quite sure where to go with it, but, UFOs, or at least the Luciferian type beings that, utilize these technologies. These are externalized, technologies, and at times, it can separate one from their inner consciousness and their inner development. This is what happened with Atlantis. And of course, there's some beings that have the both in harmony with each other, and that's why it really depends on the race. Yeah. As far as what their intentions are. Yes,
indeed so. And I think the other thing to point out to your listeners is that President Eisenhower at that time, due to the excellent research of Nick Redfern, and it's something I also parrot on about, is the fact that they were looking at, the American government were forming an agency called the Collins Elite that was looking at non-human entities entering via portals. Conclusion being that it was a cult ritual that was the primary cause of these bizarre UFOs coming in and air forces having to be scrambled. Is there any wonder President Eisenhower had heart attacks because of it all? The stress of it, Laura, is remarkable, and I think the brutality of it is at times shocking for what we are exposed to. And there seems to be a hidden hand. Can't work out what it is, but this... Anyway, tell the listeners, I'm waffling, tell the listeners about your UFO experiences and what happened to you.
Okay, well, I haven't really had that many. I'm not really a contactee, but I was addressed, when I was young about just my path and, how they would try and destroy me and rip me away from it and to hold on to it for dear life. And it had to do with the positive timeline. And I looked through a viewfinder at it, and they, and it was, beautiful. And they said, you can assist in manifesting this. Just don't, just be cautious. And I don't even remember really, but I know there was a period of time where I was being prepared before I was 12 to just handle this path. And that's really, my experiences, mainly have to do with that. Otherwise, I just really connect directly to source. I just, I did some energy work where I was on ships, and I saw some of their technologies and, them taking prints of our chakras and our energy and our auras and actually using it as a weapon against us so that they can, really pinpoint where our weaknesses are on an individual level. But this was just what I saw because I was clearing some energies of other people that were being, attacked or targeted. But, but there's something about the last thing you said I found, really interesting. But yeah, I haven't had that many experiences, but I plan to because I've just sort of been waiting for the beings from Venus. A lot of my path has to do with Venus and the Venus transits and what the Mayans understood. And I'm just really selective, and I think I filter a lot out. I don't channel. I want to go directly to source. I don't have a lot of trust right now for a lot of races, but I know that there's a lot of intervention and a lot of benevolent forces. I'm just kind of waiting, before I open myself up fully to that, and I'm just more interested in just focusing on the Trinity and the inner divine blueprint. And whatever races care to assist me on a benevolent level, great. But I think I'm just doing fine just on my own right now.
What is the Trinity, Laura, as a matter of interest?
Well, it's, it's the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, I guess you could say. It's the Mother, Father, magical child. It's the Mother, Father, Christ energy. But it's called different things, like Ashiana Jan would call it Akasha, and it's connected to sound, right. Light, and the womb, the mother womb, and it's really the Godhead, it's the Trinity.
And anybody, so I'm interrupting, carry on, my love, go on.
I was just going to say, so when we're in unity, when the masculine and feminine within us are in unity, it births this magical child, which is regenerative, and it's a miracle vibration. When we're in separation, when those forces are separate, that's when the Luciferian satanic energies start to come forward. And that's what happened in creation. There was free will, and the mother and father split, and there's stories about why that all happened and how that happened, and that's where this dark satanic energy was birthed from. It was birthed from darkness. It was birthed from separation. And so when we're separate, which is what they want to conquer and divide, we manifest more demonic energies because we're not in balance, and they feed on that. And we, become a part of this whole just mess that we're in. So that's why sacred union and unity is so important, because it births and it creates this regenerative flow. It connects us with nature. It connects us with miracles. And there's many benevolent races that, are from other universes here to assist us. But right now I think it's a time of discernment, but there's some great channelers that have, contacted the best. And so I'm just aligning with that, I go to my heart, and my intuition more than anything.
You sound like, Laura, you do sound, when I'm speaking to you, and a lot of people have commented on this, I'm interested in your thoughts. You sound like you're under anxiety, or you're under stress, or you speak very fast. You don't seem relaxed when you speak. Is it stress, or is it just you, or is it an example of what we, because I'm a stress head, of what we have to put up with? And I'm not saying you are. Is it an example, perhaps, of what goes on behind the scenes, do you think, or is...
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've not been grounded. I was out of my body for about 20 years. It's taken me, a lot of years to get into my physical body. I talk fast. I'm just in this other vibration. I don't really do well in this density, in this physical world, but I'm not stressed.
Good.
No, I'm not stressed. I talk fast. Some people, information comes through me really, really, really quick. I try and slow down. There's a lot of urgency in my nervous system, and, I'm tired,
Right,
so.
Right. No, I get it. I get that. You see, I've read stuff about you here, there, and everywhere. It's just been, I just wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, I think you've come out with some amazing clarification points, and, I wanted to focus really on, your experiences and all that kind of thing. Time and timelines are the issue, are the elephant in the room. And as I say, just rounding off, because we're coming up to the end of the show, I know that I've been speaking to the guy who has been labelled a fraud. I've seen all that information about him, except it's when you listen to him and he starts coming out with stuff to do with timelines and, and he's involved in Dan Burisch, isn't it, who we're talking about? And, he's been dealing with, he came out with some interesting remarks regarding a J-Rod, and the reports of people seeing praying mantis aliens is in fact a diseased alien that's got kind of like a form of muscle osteoporosis that causes it to lean and give it a praying mantis type look, which I thought was unbelievable. I've been speaking to him and he says, I'm open, but I do have an element of doubt. He's saying that Majestic, the organisation, is undergoing a big legal hoo-ha at the moment because in its first history in 65 years they're wanting to go public with the media at some level about what they are and who they do. They're more famous, as he says, than any secret society. So what do you think's going on there, Laura? Do you have any inside scoop or information to tell us?
Well, what's going on with MJ12 and all that? I don't really know. I think they've been trying to shut down using the looking glass technologies because it's really dangerous to be messing around with timelines. And so, there's a mixed bag of both good and bad, in the intel communities, and there's a war within the intel communities of those that want to see humanity progress and those that are on the dark side that want to control humanity. So I think that that's still going on, but the push to bring this stuff to the public attention is huge. But we have to understand, people are going to hear that yes, there are extraterrestrials, and then they're going to have to handle what they want and how to address this. And this is what the real issue is. They want to get further. They want us to be further immersed into the nanotechnology and into the artificial intelligence systems. And we have to make some, pretty smart choices here. And this is where we don't want to be duped and we don't want to be led astray and we don't want to give ourselves over or give our power over to them. And it's been building up for a really, really long time. And this is why disclosure has taken so long. And I always knew, when disclosure does happen, be careful of what they say because they're going to tell you it's going to be based on something that's rather controlled. Disclosures already happen amongst all of us. But when our governments do it, believe me, it's not going to be very authentic. And if it is, then we'll know it, but it'll be based on things connected to, our planetary body being regenerated and healed. But this is the other danger is that they created the mess and they want to come in like the heroes to clean it up. And that's where the technology, comes into play. So, I won't know until all the characters are out on the table, as far as what my thoughts are and what race is good and what isn't. But, we have what we need within ourselves to solve all these problems. And we're going to get the most assistance when we step up to the plate and not rely on any more arrangements with extraterrestrials, because we did that, and we did that to help them and to help their race sort of replenish themselves, and they took advantage of us, and they ended up abducting millions of people. So, yeah, I don't really know what's going on there. All I know is when I got in touch with, everything that Burisch was about, when I got away from the Mars recruitment, that was right when he said that we had gotten back on the positive timeline. And so, a lot of my work has been about keeping the natural stargates opening, which he talks about a lot, that they've wanted to shut down the natural stargates opening, which is our ascension, and, have control over the stargates, which is part of the alien agenda. And so this is what I've been combating, my whole life, and all of us really have, whether we're aware of it or not. The whole idea of, having this natural opening and blossoming of our consciousness, or more control, a police state, martial law, and, all this other stuff that we're seeing. And we're sort of experiencing both timelines simultaneously. And, but this is where we have choice, and we still have choice. But the window period isn't open for very long. We're in a stellar activation cycle that pretty much closes in 2017, so we need to get in alignment. This is why this is, really an urgent time. The next couple of years are very critical.
Very interesting, Laura. It's very interesting listening to you. And just in closing, it is of note when everybody's ranting on you on YouTube about what you said, what you didn't say, and what you mean. I've noted that somebody did say on YouTube that your experiences, Laura, are all about not dealing with the world around you, and that's why you're into this, because it's a retreat from the world around us. And this is what a lot of them say. It's bullshit, absolute bullshit. But
yeah, you know what? And I didn't go to Mars, and I decided to stay here to help humanity, and to get this much crap, it's just like, you got to be kidding me. And it's like, it's been hard enough to survive, and it's like whatever communication glitches that I have, and the fact that I'm not perfect, everybody look in the mirror. It's like, why don't we just start appreciating each other a little bit more?
I'm sorry.
Because, I don't have to be doing this work.
No, exactly. I'm sorry. I just need to make a point of clarification there that wasn't a dig at you. It's an observation in terms of what you said a few moments ago, when you precisely said the opposite of what they were saying. It isn't your work. Is in fact all about standing up in the world, making a mark, not running away from challenges, and for humanity to embrace what it can do without exterior forces or looking to exterior forces. We have it all in us. That's the essence of what you're saying. So,
absolutely.
Correct, yeah.
Yes, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes.
I wasn't sure quite where you were going, but yeah, and right. We can't escape it. We have to face it head on. Just like we have to face our past, we have to face our wounds, we have to face our insecurities, we have to face our fears. And when you face it, it's not as scary when you're, compared to denying it and pushing it away, because that's a form of fear. So, embrace your power. I mean, we are superior beings to these lower elements and lower forces that are in our world. And the more we can just step into that and face our power and be comfortable with it, rather than handing it over to somebody else to run for us, then we're on track. We really are. That's what I did with the Mars recruiters. I said no, I got my power back, and they've left me alone.
Yes. We must have a separate. I must get this guy Andrew on the program. I've been trying to email him. He's not responded. I would like him as a guest, because I'd just like to hear what all the Pegasus stuff is all about. But Laura, thank you very much for your time in coming on the show. And I think you've addressed some very important issues here about your work and what you do and where you precisely stand with things, and I'm glad that I've given you that chance. Thank you very much for appearing on the Tony Topping Show. Next week on the Tony Topping Show, God only knows. Catch you later!